Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we're joined by the wonderful Justin Chon, who is the writer, director, and actor of Focus Features Blue Bayou. And I wanted to start by asking about the way that you tell this story, because I know you did a lot of extensive research into adoptees and deportation issues, and that's obviously a central theme throughout the film for your character, Antonio. And you managed to capture the story in a way which really reflects a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the day-to-day issues that come with that. And yet at the same time, you capture it so well because it's always centered through the emotion of this character and his individual journey and the intimacy of that. And so when you were writing the script, how did you ensure that you were capturing those really minute details and finessing a lot of that into the script, but making sure that it was always led by character?
Yes, there's the external plot which we're tracking is his process of deportation. But to tackle what you're speaking of, I had five adoptee friends who were not being deported that consulted on the film, and basically every draft was read by them, and feedback was given in terms of like what felt real, what felt authentic, what felt phony, what wasn't accurate to their experience, and all that was taken into consideration. And I constantly was changing the script so that it reflected more of what they felt was true to them. And then it was about, when I started talking to impacted adoptees, people who were facing deportation or had been deported, also changing the script to what they felt was authentic, which is why, there was a different ending, and I changed ending because of their input. So I think that was my North Compass, was really leaning on, on their community and making sure that I was servicing them.
Yeah. And when it comes to the visual language of the film, I feel like with all of your films, it has a very distinctive style. And a lot of that comes from the fact that it was really important to you to shoot on Super 16 from the very beginning. And was that even when you were first writing the script that became something that was important to you in terms of the visual storytelling you wanted?
When I pitched this story to Macro, I said it in the first meeting. I said, this needs to be shot in 16 millimeter. And you're not going to talk me out of it, right? So every time we met, they're like, hey, let's talk about the 16. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to be 16, Super 16. And they'd be like, and then even until pre-production, they're like, hey, listen, if you gave up that, you could have this extra stuff that you wanted. And I was like, no, that's part of it that we're not touching. So like, it was about being super vigilant and super transparent that that's what I wanted from the very beginning. Because in this day and age, it's not the most efficient process. That we're shooting in New Orleans, the film needed to be shipped back to Los Angeles to be processed and scanned, developed and scanned. And also there's more ways that it can go wrong, within the shipping, or you don't, pack it right. But I just felt it was important because it just needed to feel, the film needed to have that tactile, sort of visceral feeling to it, just like a Cassavetes film, had. When I watch, his old films, like, A Woman Under the Influence or Faces, or there's just this tactile, like, and it's not exactly reality because it's 24 frames a second, but just the texture just made it feel so much more raw, and I thought it was important in the storytelling for this film.
Yeah. And that also carries across into the use of color in the film. And some of that's from lighting and a lot of the location settings. But then it's also the time of day that you shoot and what the sky is doing at that point. And so, how did you go about mapping out the way that you also wanted to use color to tell a story visually?
Yeah, color is very important in my films. Gook was black and white. Miss Purple was, it's in the title. It's purple and green, complementary. Green is the color of money, and she's doing things to take care of her dad. And this film is, there's blue, but there's also, we use a lot of different colors. Like, for example, like, during the motorcycle is red, it's that sort of like desire and the color of blood. And he's really just willing to sacrifice, his morals and what he's trying to get, the ghosts, in his past, trying to get rid of them, but he's doing it, something's very compromising, and there's that sort of energy to it. So it's important because, ultimately you can get really heady about these things, but my philosophy is like, I'm doing it to try to make you feel something. And, you can't deny that certain colors make you feel a certain way. When you watch, I know Kieslowski's films, or you watch Wong Kar-wai's films, or like they're so saturated in color. I mean, you look at Kieslowski's films, like it's like he has a color series, color blue, color white, color red series, that trilogy, and it makes you feel a certain way. And I think I like to utilize color to try to get an emotional response.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the camera work and a lot of the choices that you've made in your shot listing also create a very specific emotional response, in the fact that when we look at the relationship on screen between Antonio and Kathy, played by Alicia Vikander, that relationship has a real intimacy, and we feel like we're really able to step inside of it as audience members because of the way that you bring the camera inside of that relationship to create that intimacy. And there's a lot of close-ups and handheld used in a very specific way. So what did a lot of your pre-production in terms of shot listing look like to figure out that style as well?
Yeah, I do shot list. I shot list this film a few times, and then and then we go location scout, and we kind of go, is this going to work for us into the way we imagined it? But ultimately, I throw it all away. Like ultimately, I've done the exercise, and it means I've been very thoughtful about what I'm going to shoot, but it really depends on the energy, also the actors, what they want to do. So like, I don't want to preset anything. So we go in and we're open to throwing away the plan. So the handheld of it all, it allows us to be malleable in that way. But, but for example, that oneer, the fight between me and Alicia, that's an unbroken take. And, we had sort of an idea, and then it's also, but that kind of shot is location dependent. So it was always supposed to be a oneer. It was always supposed to be an unbroken take. So I didn't want to be manipulated by cuts. But when you get to the space, you're like, okay, we had a sort of an idea, but now it's got to fit for this space. So when does it become two shot? When do you go into who's single? And kind of make it feel not too contrived. So it's a dance. It's also a dance with Alicia. Like, we're like, well, do you feel comfortable? Like, what would you do here? Would you go to the fridge, or would you go here? And it's like, that kind of shot is very much, we have a basic sort of general idea, and then we have to start to make it very specific. But then also take into consideration everyone's sort of needs, so yeah, it's I think it's totally a dance.
Yeah. And with describing that necessity as a filmmaker to make a lot of very specific choices, but then also to be willing to throw things away and make different choices in the moment, does that carry through to a lot of the ways in which you work on this film? Because when you look at your performance as well, I imagine that especially when you're directing every single scene of the movie, that there's a real necessity to go in there with a really clear idea of who your character is and how you want to approach playing him, but yet also being open to playing in the moment, and also probably not having the time to kind of like sit there in as much detail as maybe you would on another project.
Yeah, that is a huge consideration when you're acting and directing in a project. My workaround for that was insane amount of preparation beforehand. So like the accent, maybe I wouldn't have spent that much time on it, but like I just didn't want it to be something I was even thinking about. So I just drilled it. Also, spending a lot of time in New Orleans, and making sure that I like intimately knew. So like, I just was really present, and I wasn't like thrown off by things. And then just really working on the scene work. And then it's about, like you're saying, in the moment, what I'm doing there is I've already worked out, what my, objective in the scene, all that actor tool kit stuff. I've done all that, but then my job is first of all, as a director, is to make the other actors feel confident and taken care of. So that's what I'm really thinking about. And then when I step in front of the camera to act with them, I've already done all that pre-work. So I'm just trying to be as present and available as possible. And just truly just listening and responding with the actors and and playing with them, with what they're giving me, and making sure that they feel also like, you know, there's a true sort of sparring partner there with them, and not just like my mind is somewhere else. And then we cut, and then I go, okay, you know, it's kind of a different skill set where even in the scene, you're kind of eyeing things, and then you go, okay, that was I felt like we could pick up the pace a little bit, or you just have the intuition. And because I've done all that prep work, I have that mental space. But it's a weird skill. It's a weird kind of way to work. But what's cool is I'm in there with the actors so intimately, and anything that I ask them to do, I'm doing myself. So there's a huge trust built in that process.
And you were mentioning the dialect there, and what were a lot of the technical aspects of making sure that you landed the dialect in the correct way, and some of the sounds that were really important to you to make sure that you landed absolutely correctly?
Yeah, I worked with you know, such a gracious dialect coach, and you know, she's so patient, and we just made everything very intentional. So it's based off of three people, and they're not Asian, you know, and they're from a certain region, and you know, Antonio's from St. Francisville, so like we took an amalgamation of three people, and for specific reasons like socioeconomic, maybe the type of people they hung out with, you know, it was very regional. And then it was about also who I'm placed with, you know, because the accent, you know, it can come across fake if the people you're playing with are not on. So like, you know, all the characters were also, that was a consideration when I was hiring people, how they create that mosaic of the sonicscape of the film. So, you know, there's some real people in the film too. You know, the guy who plays the ICE agent, I found him at a GNC supplement store. He was a manager there, but he worked at Angola prison for 7 years, and he's from Baton Rouge. That's a real accent. He's not putting anything on. Ace B, who plays Q in the film, he's a rapper from New Orleans, and you can't get any more authentic than that. He's the real deal. But then, you know, my accent compared to Alicia, as we spent a lot of time talking about that, like, where is she from? Like, how do we balance this so it feels authentic and not contrived? And then the kid, you know, it's like this mosaic trying to create that soundscape. The kid doesn't have an accent because a lot of kids don't. They don't pick it up until like they get older. So there was a lot of considerations in that sense for the accent and making it. But the biggest thing for me was I really was attempting and trying to have an accurate, authentic portrayal of New Orleans, because I feel like that city is filmed in a lot, and it's kind of utilized in a way that's not true to the city. It's usually the French Quarter or Magazine Street, or, you know, and there's a lot of people live there that live on the West Bank, the other side of the river. And I just wanted to get that really right. And which is why I spent so much time thinking about this stuff.
And going back a little to what you were saying before about that trust with the actors and how it also has more of an intimacy because you're not asking them to do anything that you're not willing to do. I thought one of the amazing pieces of trust is Lindan Pham, who plays Parker in the film, because the scene where we see her shaving her head is actually something that she did, and something that you asked her right at the beginning of taking on this character. Was it something that she was just willing to step into that and jump into that right away from you describing the project and the character, or what did that conversation between the two of you look like?
That's a really great question. No one's asked me this question. I think it's such a wonderful question. Yes, I was very nervous asking, you know, because you're asking a woman to be completely just sort of out there and nude, you know, and it's a lot to ask, you know, and it's like, it takes time to grow back, and it could affect other work, you know. First of all, it really motivated me to make it worth it for her. Like, I got to make a really effective, beautiful film. But like, I was a bit nervous asking her, but I just came out with it. I said, listen, this role I think is really important. If we're not doing this bald cap thing, it just never looks right, and it's just adds to the authenticity and the realness of the film. I just feel like this character needs to have a real shaped head. But to my surprise, she was like, okay, what are the reasons? I explained them. And she's like, I had no qualms about it. She's, I'll do it. You know, and the other thing is she's French. She's from France. She's not from America. She was in a film that I love from Jack Baudillard called The Beat That My Heart Skipped. She played the piano teacher. And I just always thought she had such a depth. But, you know, knowing that she would shave her head, I just was like, okay, she's a real deal. Like, she really cares about this project in a way that I need. I need everybody to think of this more than just a job. And she was going to go there. So what that does for me is I really need to treat her with respect and the same care that she's giving me. When she shaved her head, when she got to New Orleans, we filmed it, and it was really emotional. She started crying, and I was like, wow, this is what the film is about. This is, you know, this vulnerability of all these characters, and they're willing to go to your sort of honest and exposed of who you are, I think is what this film needs. And so it was sort of like she was leading the charge in a way by shaving her head. I mean, how can anyone not do something when one of the actors is going to go there? You're like, okay, we all have to make sure that we bring it.
Yeah. I also think there's a really beautiful rapport that you managed to build on screen with your character Antonio and his daughter Jessie, played by Sydney Kowalski. And I know a lot of that was from not just spending time in rehearsals with her, but going and spending time with her and her family beforehand as well. And it also sounds like you didn't shy away from, this is what the film is about. It wasn't about having her play to emotion. It was actually about explaining the scenes and then giving her a space of understanding and freedom to play as well. And so how did you set about creating that very specific dynamic for her to get that performance? Because she's stunning in the film.
Yeah, I think, well, this is my second time with a child actor that needs to do some emotionally difficult stuff. And what I found is it's not just about the child that's acting that's important. It's really about the support around the child. So I'm casting just as much the parents as I am the kid. And because I really need for it also to be a healthy environment. So, you know, I drove up with my DP to Atlanta where they live, and I spent a few days with her and her family, you know, checked out like her place and how she lived. And we like played Candyland and, you know, did a bunch of stuff, played video games and stuff. I thought that was really important, first for the parents to trust me, and also to know that the parents were giving me my partners. So, you know, in addition to rehearsal, I was like, hey, can you just, you know, in addition to me talking to her about the scenes, I was like, can you also talk to her about what it means to her, you know, because there's going to be more of an openness with the parents than I might get, and helping her understand what the film is about and on an emotional level. Then she doesn't have to act. Anything she does will be right. You know, it's like, okay, who cares if she doesn't say the words like perfectly, or who cares if she like, you know, forgets a line like, or says something different, because it's coming from a very deep understanding of what it is. And then it's just about like making it feel like she can't make a mistake. I was never like, ooh, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. I was just like, that was awesome. Hey, what if you did this? So it always felt like her idea, and there's a sense of play. So she felt like she was so free and could do whatever. That's why you get that performance that feels so natural, because it's not a lot of improv. But she just feels like she's just existing and she's allowed to do what she wants. I thought that was, you know, that's just my process, but you know, everybody works differently, and kids, it's a certain thing, you know, it's a certain thing.
And because you did have the opportunity to have rehearsals with your cast, what were kind of the objectives or goals that you went into that process with, in terms of whether there were specific scenes that you really wanted to work on with the cast, or it was more about emotional beats and character building, or just the overall intimacy amongst everybody so that could carry through onto screen?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this was an indie film, so like we didn't have like a huge budget to have that time. So it was about me finding the time, you know, like me tracking down some of these people and just convincing them that this is important. Like, let's rehearse this stuff. But you know, it just feels more lived in when you can kind of like exist with them in these characters, and there's a trust built, and ultimately when they step on set, they're just open, they're just ready to go, they're not like nervous. And I think it doesn't need to be this way where it's like, be a professional, show up and do, like, there's also a sense of like the atmosphere on set to make it feel like this is fun. I mean, we have time constraints, but like, let's enjoy each other's company, and I think sometimes as an actor, when I've been on films, it's very much like stand here, say this, and that's not always very pleasant. Yeah. But I mean, it's about like on set, like from the actors to the DP to the gaff, like just creating very family atmosphere. So it's pleasant.
And one of the scenes that you've obviously talked extensively about within the film is the moment where Alicia's character, Kathy, sings the song Blue Bayou. But what I wanted to ask you about that is when you talk about it, you describe it as this moment where this family are really trying to convince themselves, and it's almost a pretense of everything is going to be okay, even though they ultimately know that it's not going to be underneath because of everything that's already pushing in on them in this pressure situation. And so how did you firstly want to use that scene as a real tipping point in terms of where they're at emotionally with everything that's happening to them as a family, but then also following that scene to start allowing them to kind of like face the reality of what's coming towards them a little bit more and a little bit more, and almost like cracking away the veneer after that really pivotal moment for the two of them?
Yeah, structurally it's the midpoint, and it's there's a divide as soon as that happens, and it's like it's a check-in. They're at this party and it's supposed to be pleasant, but they're dealing emotionally with all these things that they're thinking about. So ultimately it's trying to be like a visual sonic storyteller and not do it through dialogue. It's like it's more felt, than sort of explained, and I feel like that's the most powerful kind. um it's a hard balance because sometimes it feels like when you're just cutting to people just kind of sitting there thinking, it can get old really quickly, but for this it's active because she's singing, and then you're hearing the lyrics of the song, and how does that make you feel? And I just felt like that's the first time they all are kind of truthful with one another. She picked that song, and it's almost like it's going to be very hard, and I'm picking the song because it is hard. And then they're looking at each other, and then also Antonio's like, Jesus Christ, like, how do we end up here? What now? And it's that reflection, and then it's like right after that, just getting on with it is like, okay, this is the challenges. This is a sort of structuring and setting up of like what they're actually going to have to deal with, and you just start throwing just wrenches at the characters, so it feels like there's a contrast there. But these are things that structurally and intellectually you kind of place to make the story work. But then trying to realize them on screen is a whole nother thing, and it's just a tricky alchemy and balance that is not an exact science, right?
And you were bringing up just a moment ago some of your own experiences on set as an actor with other filmmakers. And you've mentioned in the past how you never really felt like you landed in a space where you had specific mentorship within the industry as an actor. And so as a result of that, do you feel like it actually gives you a really great skill as a filmmaker who's directing themselves in scenes, in the fact that you've always had to kind of had that your own internal gut instinct of what's working? Is this the right choice? Is this going to work? And so do you almost feel like in a weird way that's helped you to develop that very specific set of skills as a filmmaker directing themselves in projects?
This is a wonderful question because the answer is absolutely. I rarely got to play my career leads. So like I'm an afterthought when I step on set. They're just like, just do your job, and no one's really paying attention to my performance. No one's really, considering what I'm doing too much. It's just like, so I've had to take care of myself artistically, on so many sets and so many projects. So I've had to watch myself. I've had to figure out that I've had to develop that skill of taking care of myself and making sure that I don't look like an idiot, you know? And so yeah, 100%. It's helped me in being able to direct and act. And then, you know, the other thing is like doing so many hundreds of hours of acting class where it's like you're watching so many actors perform and then you getting on the stage and performing. And then, you know, there's a lot of times where I haven't agreed with the acting teacher. And sometimes when that's the best sort of time as an actor where you'll question and have your own opinions apart from the teacher, like you've done so much training or so much class that you're like, you know what, like the teacher is also human and he could not be right, you know? So challenging that in an acting class, being like, okay, I'm going to be my own barometer and do this scene work and see how or taking his notes and trying to think the note behind the note and then, you know, adjusting my performance and trying to be self-dependent in that way has really helped in acting and directing, you know, simultaneously, but it's always it's a weird skill. It's a very particular skill. But you know, those misfortunes I've had, I think, have been advantages, right?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a skill that pays off in this movie. It's a really stunning film and a wonderful accomplishment. So congratulations and thank you for sharing all of this, Justin.
Thank you so much. Thanks.